Hi, my name is Gibson, and I'm the creator of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video, and in this video, I want to talk to you a little bit about hypervigilance as a fearful avoidant and how this can translate sometimes into the expectation of other people to be hypervigilant in the relationships around you. So this question actually comes from a member inside PDS who said something along the lines of, do you ever experience being hypervigilant as a fearful avoidant and then being irritated that other people don't think multiple steps ahead the way that you do in relationships? And I thought this was such a fantastic question and share because as many of you know, I used to be fearful avoidant. I've definitely experienced this, and I've had hundreds of conversations, maybe thousands of conversations over the years with other fearful avoidants in counseling, in groups, in workshops I taught who've had this same struggle. So I want to talk about some of the root causes here, and I want to talk about like what you can actually do about this. The first thing you have to understand, if this is you, is that this is part of your programming. Part of your adaptation to a chaotic environment in whatever form that took at some point in your life, most often in childhood, was to become really adept at reading between the lines. If you could get really good at noticing micro expressions, facial expressions, tones of voice, body language, little shifts in behavior, little patterns that weren't aligned or some sort of pattern was different and there was an incongruency somewhere, if you could read between the lines very, very effectively, you were more likely to avoid pain, suffering, or trauma. And so you became good at it. And usually when there was an environment where you didn't really have much control in other areas, where you couldn't necessarily like leave a chaotic environment at 8 years old and go get a job and fend for yourself, or, do things that may have found you some peace in other forms, you figured out, okay, well, if I can predict, 5 steps ahead of other people based on what's happening, this gives me some form of control when I feel out of control in my environment otherwise. So this hypervigilant dynamic and this ability to read into things can become like a superpower on one hand, because it really can help you like stay 5 steps ahead, see what's coming around the corner, maintain some sort of semblance of control. But at the same time, it can also be really challenging, really chaotic. And if you haven't reprogrammed your big core wounds and stories, it's not that the hypervigilance itself is chaotic, it's the meaning we attach to the hypervigilance that becomes chaotic. So for example, you may see things like you start telling stories to yourself like, oh, they didn't maintain eye contact when they told me that story the way that they normally do, and it means they're cheating or they're betraying me in some way, when really maybe the person was feeling shame about something personal or vulnerable to them, and it could have been for a different reason that was happening. But the mind tends to give meaning based on its own unresolved core wounds around things like this, where there's ambiguity, because that's how it's sort of trying to keep us to, stay safe. So with all of that being said, this is where hypervigilance, wow, this is where hypervigilance comes from. And this tends to be sort of the upside of it, is that you can really stay ahead of the game, and the downside of it. But when we look at like how this comes into our relationships, sometimes, especially like workplace relationships, romantic relationships, especially during times of stress, often the fearful, avoidant, or disorganized attachment style basically copes by trying to stay 5 steps ahead, by like, noticing every little detail and everything that could go wrong and having a plan for that. And this allows this individual a lot of times to be like hyper prepared for things, but there's a cost in terms of stress, right? What if you're becoming hyper prepared for a situation that may not actually happen? Or what if you're becoming hyper prepared for something to the point where you get consumed by that situation, and the cost of being consumed and overwhelmed by every little detail of something is actually more stressful than if you just had to deal with the worst case scenario. So, there's sort of this gray area that takes place. And in this zone, something that can be problematic is fearful avoidance, because there's this hyper pressure on oneself. Our relationship to ourselves as individuals, irrespective of your attachment style, tends to be the relationship you project onto other people. So it tends to be like, oh, if I have to have expectations and so much pressure and be so detail oriented all the time, and that's what I expect from myself, well, naturally, that's what I'm going to expect from my partner, because we project from our perception of how things should be. How we should be is how everybody should be. It's just what the subconscious mind does. And so this can cause friction in a relationship and challenges and pain points that are really important to resolve. Now, something that's really important to note here is there are 2 ways to solve for this. Way number one is to do a tremendous amount of reprogramming on core wounds. It's extremely beneficial because when you reprogram all these core wounds, you still have the hypervigilance, so you can catch everything and be aware of stuff and notice when there's a shift in pattern, but you're not just subconsciously on autopilot without even consciously recognizing, attaching painful meaning to it. So you can see an incongruency in somebody's behavior and be like, oh, something's up, but you're not quick to go, oh, this person's betraying me, I can never trust them again, I need to leave the relationship immediately. Or you're not quick to go, my colleague at work is gossiping behind my back. You're not quick to just assign painful assumptions to things. And honestly, doing this on a regular basis like frees you of so many things in your life and allows you to like use that powerhouse tool of hypervigilance and being aware without having to deal with all the suffering that can come with it. And by the way, if you want to do like a really deep dive into this, do the emotional mastery and belief reprogramming course inside PDS. It's honestly like, I want everybody to take this course. It's like a life-changing course. If you just take it, it's for free. You can check it out for free for 7 days. Go through it. It's intense. There's stuff that you're going to realize that you didn't realize, but it's going to show your blind spots, help you see the effects of like these thoughts, these stories, and give you really effective tools to reprogram so you can set these things to rest, be free from this stuff once and for all, and use all that real estate in your mind all day that was worrying about worst case scenarios and attaching meaning and making assumptions. Clear it out and actually use so much of that emotional energy for like growth, connection, doing and achieving the things that you want to do for yourself in your life. And you'll just feel free as a result of that. So anyways, but going back to this, so way number one is to do that core wound reprogramming, reprogram those core wounds, reprogram those painful assumptions, those painful pieces of meaning you attach to things. And the second thing that you can do is then learn to communicate what your needs are. You can notice an incongruency or a pattern, but rather than make an assumption, create some of your own suffering accidentally with that assumption, push people away with your assumption, and then have this like sort of destructive component that comes with it, where sometimes we leave relationships too fast. Sometimes we don't have staying power in relationships as fearful avoidance, even like workplace relationships, rather than just like getting fed up and fight or flighting out of there. Instead, it's like you won't be coming from that place. You won't just have these painful assumptions driving your behavior and emotions, and you'll have room to notice something's up and go communicate about it, express a need, let somebody know you need reassurance, clarity, transparency, set a boundary, whatever it might be that leads to healthier, more productive outcomes. So then you can still stay, ahead of things and recognize when something's off, but you can have healthy communication that's constructive and actually moves the needle towards more thriving relationships, personally, at work, in all different areas of life, rather than something that creates destruction long-term and can be really heavy and difficult to carry. So anyways, I hope this makes sense. I thought this was a great question. I wanted to address this. And yeah, sometimes you'll be frustrated, like, hey, somebody else isn't being as hypervigilant as I am. But this is, again, just like anything else, a call for communication. It's a call for being like, hey, these are my expectations. Let me convert my expectations of you into a need instead. Talk to you about the need, have a discussion about the need, let somebody know, split up priorities, delegate things, let somebody know your expectations in that situation. So it becomes, again, constructive communication around these pain points rather than something that just like drives assumptions, drives pain, suffering, frustration. So yeah, if you want to do a deep dive into like reprogramming that stuff, check out our emotional mastery and belief reprogramming course. It's you can check it out for free for 7 days. You can click the link in the description box below for the 7-day free trial. And then once you enter in, go into the dashboard, just type in emotional mastery and you'll see it pop up on your dashboard there. And you have access to all the other courses in there at the same time. All the courses, all of the webinars, all of the social events, all the amazing stuff we have in there on a regular basis for support and community and connection as well. So thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you in the next video.